The latest tech.
I'm Alexa. I can answer your questions.
Interviews.
And we are evolving, and we are seeing an amazing opportunity that is happening.
Accessibility.
Accessibility is one of our core values. It's even a part of our mission statement.
This is DoubleTap TV.
Welcome to another edition of Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being with us each and every single week. If you want to get involved, feedback at AMI.CA is our email address. Of course, you can send us anything there. And on Twitter, it is at DoubleTap Canada with a hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. I am Marc Aflalo. With me each and every single week, Stephen Scott. Stephen, live from Glasgow, Scotland. Stephen, we're talking this week about a topic that I have to admit, you and I are both walking into this completely blind. No pun intended here. And that is Web 3.0. When I say that term to you, what do you understand? What do you envision? What do you even glean from that?
It sounds like I need to buy something new, but do I need to upgrade my router? What's required here? That's the first question. I guess I'm thinking, what new hardware do I need for this? But web, I get it to some degree because Web 1, Web 2, which I do remember going through that transition process of seeing the web develop. And I don't remember it really landing like some big event, but I just remember the web changing.
Big launch party. Web 2.0 is here!
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that, but it was very much a transitional thing. And I remember us going through that process where websites became more interactive, where the web became more interactive, I guess. So, going into Web 3, whatever that is, in my head, I guess I'm thinking, because I hear so much about the metaverse, I hear about the world moving, or the internet moving away from being on a screen to being just around us. I guess that's where I'm at when it comes to what Web 3 is. I'm wondering if I'm right in that. I don't know.
Well, we're gonna dive into it. We're gonna welcome a guest who's been on the show before talking about the metaverse, as you bring that up, and his name is Chris Matthieu, and we're gonna bring Chris on in the next segment, and we're gonna dive deep into this because I know Web 1.0 was really just the first iteration of the internet where we were going to get information. We were going to view websites and view articles and get that information, but there was no real back and forth in terms of sending your name in, signing up for accounts, people tracking your information. That's where Web 2.0 really kind of raised to the forefront when we started to get interactive with things. That's what they refer to as Web 2.0. Now, Web 3.0, as you said, I think it's really about this word decentralization, and I know it's a scary word because it starts to bring up terms like NFTs, cryptocurrency, that quite honestly, I think you need some kind of degree that doesn't exist out there to really, truly understand how it all works. But the fact of the matter is that everybody is accountable for their information. Everybody controls their own content and their own data. So we're not really relying on others. We're not relying on the Facebooks to post our pictures. We still own that stuff. And that's where we're going to dive deeper and find out not only what that means for the way we see the internet today, but the way we consume things like this show, or the way we, how does accessibility fall into that? That's a really big concern, because if we control things and there's less oversight from anybody, whether it's a governing body or some kind of organization, how do we ensure that those things are accessible? And that's a concern.
It is, yeah. I guess when you talk about decentralization, I wonder about, so are we moving away from the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and instead, for example, we're almost going backwards. We're going back to the days of, I've got a website, Mark, you should go read it. It's called Stephen Scott Says Stuff. And, when you go there, I say things and you can read them. Almost like back to the days of the old blogs, where people, I say old blogs, people still blog today, but it's nowhere near as popular as podcasting, YouTube, and all the rest of it, and of course social media content. So what you're saying is that we move away from all that, and actually we move back to more individual channels. I'm wondering how popular that's going to be.
I think one of the biggest things here, and I think we're realizing this as we introduce this show, is that there are a lot of questions. And the reason we're talking about this on this show is because we want to get some of those answers, not only for ourselves, guys, for you guys at home too, because we have the same questions that you guys at home have, and we've been getting the emails and we've been getting the interaction from you, and we know that this is a hot topic because there are all these buzzwords that float around, and we just don't have the answers ourselves or the best way to explain that to you. So, Stephen, we're talking all about Web 3.0 this week on Double Tap TV, and we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to dive into these questions and hopefully get some clarity by the time that these 22 minutes are up. So, stick around. It is Double Tap TV. He is Stephen Scott. I am Marc Aflalo, talking all things Web 3.0. Don't be confused. Don't be concerned. We're going to get the answers to your questions. But if you have them after the show or think of something during the show, please email us. It's feedback@AMI.CA. On Twitter, make sure you're following us at DoubleTap Canada and use the hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. We will field all your questions on future shows and hopefully get some answers from Chris Matthieu after a break.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being with us each and every single week. If you want to get involved, the email address is feedback@AMI.CA. Of course, you can send us anything there. On Twitter, if you're not already following us, it's @DoubleTapCanada. And don't forget that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap, and we'll get to your questions. I am Marc Aflalo, alongside me, Stephen Scott. Stephen, I'm really excited to welcome our next guest. His name is Chris Matthieu. He is an expert in all things metaverse. He's an entrepreneur. He's bought businesses, created businesses, everything, NFT, cryptocurrency. Chris, welcome to Double Tap TV. This is now your second time on the show. You must feel like an alumni at this point.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Stephen. Yeah, an old man.
An old man, a regular on the show at this point, I think.
A regular, yes.
Don't start asking for money because it's not going to happen.
I try, Chris. That
Chris,
never works.
you know, Stephen and I were talking off the top of the show about, you know, kind of the history of the web and what we know the internet to be. And I think when you go back to the beginning, or we kind of have to go back to the beginning, and I want to do that a little bit with you because, you know, there was Web 1.0, I guess we call it, which was really this, the idea of just interacting with information. It wasn't really that two-way connection, right? And then Web 2.0 was introduced. And how would you describe Web 2.0 to people?
Yeah, I would say Web 1 was like read-only, the read-only web, and Web 2 was like read and write. So that was the birth of social media, like people being able to write blogs, you know, posts and like write to the web. So now we're moving into Web 3, which is really... Go ahead.
Sorry, and also with Web 2.0, I mean, I guess a lot of that was also about the ability for companies and social media sites to track us and to see where we're going so they can turn that into some kind of monetization. So I cut you off there, but so now we're talking about Web 3, and this is like, Stephen and I are just like our audience out there. That sometimes we know a little bit more than some other people because we claim to be experts here, but I think we're walking into this, you know, together, both blind. So how would you describe Web 3?
You know, I'm glad you talked about the social media aspects and the algorithms, because with Web 2, you're absolutely right. We saw trillion-dollar companies rise that are building algorithms based on everything they know about you, everything you've written, and you know, we keep hearing breaches, you know, data security breaches, you know, all of our information just keeps going out there. And at one point, Mark Zuckerberg had said, there is no such thing as privacy. You know, that was what we're all like dealing with now. Web 3 is hopefully the cure for all of this. So it's a decentralized internet, which means instead of everything going into like Facebook's data centers and centralized, you know, servers, it's the point where let's almost like start over what the internet was meant to be, where it's all peer-to-peer, decentralized, and the user potentially owns our own data. It's not the Facebooks or the Twitters of the world, you know, we're in control. So that should eliminate the data breaches, you know, and the algorithms, you know, where we're being like stalked, cyber stalked, if you will. But there's a lot of still pros and cons of Web 3. It's still early, but it's exciting.
It's an interesting concept, I guess, but you know, some might argue that the genie is already out of the bottle on user data. How do you get it back into the bottle? I mean, what you talk about here is essentially an evolution of something, but what you really need to do that, I guess, is revolution. How do you do that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the data that's already in those clouds is you know, is fair game, and you can't get it back. But going forward, as we see maybe the next generation of social, you know, they call them dApps, like decentralized applications. So the next generation of dApps, we'll start seeing more control, more privacy, more peer-to-peer, and you're starting to see it with like banking, if you will. There's a whole section called DeFi, decentralized finance. So now instead of like, you know, everything going like into your bank or into your PayPal and wiring money moving around, it's all becoming peer-to-peer transfer of funds, you know, via crypto or tokens or Ethereum or Bitcoin, what have you. So we're seeing it on every aspect. It's like the internet or the web is being rebuilt.
From a traditional user standpoint, from someone who really is not technical, I listen to this and I say to myself, okay, does that mean that I'm going to need to start setting up servers? How am I going to host my information if I want to have a website and someone to view things? What is this transition going to be like? Is there going to be something that just an everyday user will just slowly migrate to without needing to worry about the technical aspects of this?
That's actually the magic of the whole Web3 being decentralized. There's new technologies. One of my favorites is called IPFS. It stands for the Interplanetary File System. And what it means is that all of our hard drives, all peer-to-peer interconnect on this new decentralized network. And when we write a blog in the future, like on this decentralized web and whatnot, it's actually the content's actually going on no servers per se anymore. It's all being moved from peer to peer, people's hard drives around the world. And what's kind of cool about that is that there's really no more servers or infrastructure anymore. I mean, the AWSs and Azures and Google Clouds are going to be hurting in this new peer-to-peer world because there's no service to maintain. All the content is like peer-to-peer around the world, and you access it from the closest node, if you will, on the internet. So it'll get even faster getting content to you, and it's like highly available by design. So you've got redundancy in this kind of peer-to-peer network as is. So it's kind of magical, no servers, but you still have data, which brings up other cons about security and how do you protect that type of data. So it's still a very much a wild west, but it's getting really exciting.
We're talking all things Web3 and trying to decipher what it all means for us. And our guest this week is Chris Matthieu. I am Marc Aflalo with Stephen Scott. Chris, we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. I want to get back to more conversation about this because I feel like we're going back in time. It almost reminds me of the Napster days and when we're file sharing, and it kind of is like that. So stick around if you guys want to get involved at home. It's feedback at AMI.CA. Of course, if you're not following us already, do so now on Twitter. It is at DoubleTap Canada, and use that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. We will be back in just a moment.
For more great DoubleTap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is DoubleTap TV.
We're back on DoubleTap TV talking all things Web3. Again, if you guys want to get involved, feedback at AMI.CA and on Twitter at DoubleTap Canada with the hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. Marc Aflalo and Stephen Scott with our guest Chris Matthieu this week talking all about Web3. Chris, this really does remind me of, that first peer-to-peer music pirating service, Napster, because the technology is very similar in the way that this is going to all work. And I get the concept that, this is not something we're going to have to be very technical to figure out. My question, I guess, is, on a regulatory standpoint here, when we think about banking, the government being involved and banks being very standardized as organizations gives some people a sense of security. Other people, mostly, very wealthy people who are trying to, make sure their money's not touched by the government, tend to shy away from that. Is this something that law enforcement and government agencies are actively looking at now, or do you think that Web3 is going to just kind of emerge and they're going to have to fight for their claim afterwards?
Yeah, in the beginning, the SEC and all other countries, they're still trying to figure out what does this mean, because if crypto, like say Bitcoin, becomes like the leading currency and it's almost untraceable, what does that mean about taxes? What does it mean about, loans, traditional banking? I mean, it disrupts everything. So there has been like exchanges like Coinbase that are set up that do reporting to the SEC. So if you put real money in, real like fiat money, dollars, euros, whatever in, that gets tracked to the government agencies, and when you pull money out, especially, they get notified so that you pay taxes on that as well. Now, the money that's already in like the Bitcoin network, like that's really difficult to track because it's all peer to peer. In Web3, you have this concept of a wallet. And a wallet, you'll hear things like MetaMask is a real popular one. I know Coinbase has one now as well, so you can just do kind of like crypto banking with Coinbase. Makes it really simple for people getting started. But the wallet, it has like a long hash like associated with your account, if you will, your wallet itself. That becomes your new identity, if you will, on Web3. So no more usernames and passwords like logging in. When you land on a Web3 site, it says connect wallet. That doesn't mean you're going to get charged anything. It's kind of like your identity that you're logging in with your wallet.
It's your passport. It's like your
exactly.
this says this is Chris Matthieu. This is Marc
Exactly.
Aflalo.
But it's
And it's
still
not going to be
right.
an easy one to remember because it's like 20 characters long.
Yep, and it's anonymous still. So, but it's my identity, even though it's anonymous. And if I do want to pay, like a donation or a $5 a month subscription or whatever, that wallet, it contains all of my Ethereum or my Bitcoin money or my tokens of other ecosystems, and I can just pay with that wallet too. So it's actually really convenient, like logging in and paying and also getting money, because people just send money to that long, like we were saying, that passport ID. And as long as it's in this whole grid and you're not taking it out or converting it to dollars, it's all very peer-to-peer, very Napster-ish.
So when I opened a crypto wallet account in Canada, so I used Wealthsimple, for example, and they suddenly allow crypto. So I opened a wallet and I got, that address, like you say, but I had to prove who I was. I had to scan my driver's license, my passport, and all this stuff. So I'm assuming that at this point forward, they can report this at any time they want to the government. Is that because they wanted to get involved in this after, the craze started way back when with Bitcoin, and suddenly there are new rules that they want to just play ball with?
Yep, it's that know your customer rules, and like Coinbase does something very similar. You have to validate your actual bank account so that they can report on it. But if you just grab like MetaMask, I think it's .io, that wallet, there's a lot of those types of wallets. They're not affiliated with a centralized exchange at all. They're just a very basic crypto wallet that's not centralized and not reported on. So you still have to get money to it. So like or Ethereum to it. So I guess you could buy money like in a Coinbase or like that one you were just mentioning, and then you could transfer that money from that wallet or account into your MetaMask, and then it's kind of peer-to-peer at that point.
I think that I agree that there are definitely concerns there, but I think what is interesting is that we're not coming to this fresh. This isn't Web 1, this is Web 3. So we have learned a lot. Granted, there's more to learn. Some people need to learn the rules of Web 2, especially when it comes to web accessibility. But the fact is there's a framework in place, so we're not starting from zero. So I think that's a positive at least.
So there's this new thing called DAOs, DAO, decentralized autonomous organizations. If you start reading up on what that means, it's basically Web 3.0's answer to company entities. So basically you create a company or an organization as a DAO, and then you create a smart contract around it. So you can say, here's the shareholders, of the organization. Every time, money comes in, it gets divided, 5% each, across the board. Here's how we're going to operate. And it's a smart contract, which is really a program. So you're basically programming in the rules of the company, if you will, into this DAO, and it operates autonomously, and things just happen. Like if subscriptions come in, they divide it across the shareholders, and it's kind of a living, breathing organization. And to your point about regulatory action, the DAOs, to my knowledge, are not really even on the radar of a lot of these governments yet. But they're operating as if they are, like new world, Web 3.0 organizations.
Just picking up on that point, going right back to the start of this segment when Mark brought up the subject of regulation, I immediately get nervous, Chris, because I hear about regulation essentially being taken into individuals' hands here. And, it all sounds great in theory, but then I think about things like web accessibility, which is taken up and taken a long time for us to even get close to what we would consider regulation, never mind enforcement, because of course enforcement of web accessibility is not really in place. A lot of it is, advocacy of individuals against organizations and companies and websites, apps and all the rest. How do you deal with that in a world where essentially it's an individual world, it's an individual's world?
Yeah, I think it's going to fall on best practices. Like we've learned as web developers, how to handle like screen scrapers, screen readers, and whatnot. So I think that's just good web development practice. So I think it might be difficult in this new age of Web3, where we're talking almost a global economy and a new currency that could be a new token, if you will, of the company itself. If you kind of think about that, it's kind of like they're generating, every company potentially could be generating their own money, their own DAO and rules of how they operate. It could get very confusing, and without that regulation, to your point, there is no standardization, if you will. But I think best practices, like good web developers know, that these are acceptable best practices, and we should continue building sites that are accessible by everyone.
Chris Matthieu, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You guys at home, if you got any questions, again, it's feedback@AMI.CA. Follow us on Twitter @DoubleTapCanada with the hashtag #AskDoubleTap, and we will definitely get to your questions. On behalf of Chris Matthieu and Stephen Scott, I am Marc Aflalo. We will speak to you again next week here on DoubleTap TV.
Hosted by Marc Aflalo and Stephen Scott. Editing Jordan Steves and Marc Aflalo. Voiceover Anna VOCINO. Integrated Described Video Specialist Ron Rickford. Coordinating Producer Jennifer Johnson. Director Production Kara Nye. Director Programming Brian PERDUE. VP Content Development and Programming John Melville. President and CEO David Errington. Copyright 2022 Accessible Media Inc.